You can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. And the idea there is you can't think your way out of a problem. You can't think your way. Well, let's be clear. A logical problem, yes, that's what thinking is for. And it's very helpful. But for habits, we can't think our way out of a habit because that's not how they form. We have to feel our way out. And that feeling comes from awareness, from curiosity.
And that feeling resides where? Is it the neural tree? Is it the vagus nerve? Is it connected to the amygdala? I mean, there is some hardware here, yes? The feeling body, as you mentioned.
So there are certainly brain regions and networks involved in what's called interoceptive awareness. And I think this is where somatic experiencing can be really helpful because it kind of helps to strengthen those pathways. One of the key brain regions, and these are always overly reductionist, but just in case people have heard of this one, it's called the insula, literally the island. And the insula has been shown to be activated when people are sensing their embodied experience, whether it's their heartbeat, whether it's other things. And that's also where we feel emotion, right, is in our body. We don't feel it in our brain. Our brain doesn't even have sensory neurons. That's why you can do brain surgery without anesthesia once you cut the skull open. Fun fact.
I did not know that. That makes sense. How could you operate on a brain if it could feel you operating on it? That makes perfect sense. Wow. So these receptors don't live in the brain. So the brain is literally wired to give and receive information.
Yep.
Is that its core function?
Well, it's got a lot of functions. That's one of them. And if we want to get into some really interesting stuff, I mean, it's all interesting, but
I love it.
There's some newer work around what's called generative models. And this comes from this interesting anatomical anomaly, which is, and I actually learned in medical school that, our brain processes information that comes up from the sensory, the peripheral nervous system, and so it's okay, it's bottom up. But it turns out when they were able to look at the anatomy, the connections are actually, there are 10 times more connections going down than up. So fundamentally, people started asking, wondering, and starting to question whether it was simply about incoming sensory information. And then I don't remember where this came from, but some people started asking, well, wait a minute, can we actually process all the sensory information that's available in any one moment with the apparatus that we have? And the answer is no. Way too much information available at any one time. Our brain would crash. So what our brain does, and it's evolved to do this, is it actually makes up stories. It hallucinates in a literal sense, where you and I, everyone, we're all hallucinating our world. We're generating our world. We're creating a story of the world every moment that is based on our past experience. And that story, what our sensory information helps with is basically we're expecting certain things to look and behave the way that our story says that they should. So for example, this microphone in front of me, I expect that it's not going to move unless I move it. I expect it to be an inanimate object because in the past, that's how microphones have worked, and that's how I understand physics. So if this microphone suddenly, jumped on the top of my head, I would pay attention. I would pay real attention because my brain says there's a mismatch. This is called a, error signal, right? So the error is I was expecting that thing to be the way it is. And with the expectation, I can basically only take in very minimal sensory information. Like if it's behaving the way I expect it to, I'm basically ignoring it. That's a microphone, but I see it in my story's mind's eye. It looks very rich in detail, but my brain can't actually process sensory information in as rich detail in 4K, for example. It makes that up. What my brain is seeing is edges, colors, shadows, shapes, right? That's about it. And to give an example of that, these top-down these top-down neurons are making up the story, and the sensory information is coming in from the bottom, giving it giving it error mismatch signals. And so it's basically not firing unless there's an error that says, hey, pay attention. And that's how we function because it's very efficient. It's an efficient way to go about the world. There are caveats there because it's not a perfect system. One caveat is that we're going to expect things to be a certain way. So we're going to actually see them and feel them and hear them. And we're going to bias them to be the way we expect them to be. It's in psychology, they call this expectancy bias. And it makes it harder for us to see the world accurately because we're not really seeing the world carefully. We can't. So if something goes way off, we're going to pay attention because our sensory systems forces us to pay attention because it's a matter of survival. It's like, what's going wrong here? Is my world literally turning upside down, or figuratively? So there, it helps us really say, okay, what's going on here? We pay attention, and then we stop paying attention as soon as we've told ourselves a story that's consistent enough with our previous story to say, okay, I get it. The world's not falling apart. My world is not falling apart because everybody has their own world. They're literally living in their own world. So I know that was a lot, but I'll pause there. Does that make sense?
It's beautiful. You know what I had a picture in my mind, a story as you were describing that. And what I remembered was when Christopher Columbus arrived at the shore, the indigenous literally, so is written, could not see the ship because they had that bias of which you speak. They couldn't see it as real because it matched no story that they'd ever seen before. Right. And that's a beautiful way to describe the science that you're describing. But you know what else came through was you said top down, bottom up. Mm-hmm. So we have, obviously, you're very steeped in this, the enteric nervous system, the gut-brain axis, and how that feeds up to the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. There's all these beautiful systems. There's the body's such a, do you ever just wonder, like, wow, who created this body? This is such a magical thing, the body and the brain. Yeah. Does that come through for you still in your work?
Oh, still. Every time I think about, the bones in the skull, they're so intricate. It's like, how did this ever happen? If you look at the eye or just look at the whole thing, every time I'm amazed.
It's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. So my second question was, if we have this feeling body, to use that term, and it could be an amalgamation of the enteric nervous system or other things you could describe, but that bottom up seems to be where most people are disconnected because we live in a very top down society. Yep. How do you make sense of this for people that might be hearing this for the first time?
Well, there are some really pragmatic aspects to that. And it also reminds me, there was this James Joyce short story from over 100 years ago, just highlighting how this has always been relevant, and we're just pointing it out more now. And so there was a short story about a guy named Mr. Duffy. And the line went, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. Right? We're walking around these disembodied beings. Right? How often are we just divorcing ourselves from our feeling body? So this relates to this story because if we don't know that we are living a story that we're telling ourselves, right? Again, it's not that there's something wrong with that. We just need to know that that's how our brain works. So if we don't know that, we're just going to assume the world is the way that we think it is. And then when somebody says, no, it's not that way, we're going to say you're wrong because this is the way I see it. And I can literally see it. But the thing is, we can't literally see anything. As an example, when somebody takes a psychedelic, they often will see these, geometric patterns and things like that. One of the hypotheses is that that's actually shutting down the story system and preferencing the bottom up sensory information. And we're actually seeing more clearly, even though it looks less clear. But the more clear aspect is that that's the level of pixelation that our eyes can detect. That's accurate. We're just not used to literally seeing accurately. Pragmatically, it's really helpful to know, hey, this is my story, so that we can even step back a little bit and ask, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't fit with something that's happening, or this doesn't fit with somebody else's story. So let's open up our sense gates. Let's be curious and see where our story might be wrong. Instead of just double down and say, nope, this is the way it is. That's problematic.